Hey friends, Pastor Jeff here from Christ Church in South Philly. If there's one thing that the year 2020 has brought, it's brought a lot of disruption. There's a lot of disruption that's been caused, and because of that, we're asking questions that maybe we haven't asked for in a while. Maybe this disruption has caused you to ask some questions about like, where should I live? Where's the best place for me to raise my family or to pursue my career? Where should I live? Where should I work? What's the best industry to be in as so many jobs are getting lost left and right? What's the overall direction of our lives? Like, where are we going? This season of disruption has caused us to ask all kinds of questions. But as we're asking these questions, I'm wondering, are we asking the most important question? Are we asking the most significant question that Jesus gave us to ask, that Jesus told us we must ask as we consider the decisions that are in front of us? This question that we should be asking comes from a command that Jesus gave in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. This is what Jesus tells us. This is his command. He says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Seek first the kingdom of God. God's kingdom comes first. God's kingdom is not a geographical location. It's not a place you can find on a map. God's kingdom is the spiritual condition of surrendering our lives to Christ and having him be our king. And so when we become Christians, we're no longer part of a democracy. We're part of a monarchy where God is our king. And so as we think about the decisions that are in front of us, friends, we don't get a vote. We don't get a vote. The question that we should be asking is, God, how does this advance your kingdom? If we're called to seek his kingdom first, then any decision that we make, especially when it comes to big decisions like where we should live and where we should work and the direction our lives are going, the first way we should always ask that question is, God, how is this going to advance or hinder your kingdom work? How is this going to move forward what you want to do in my life to advance your kingdom? Or how is this going to hinder what you want to do in my life to advance your kingdom? In every decision, we're called to ask the kingdom question. How is this going to advance God's kingdom? We're to seek his kingdom first, and so that's always the first question that we should be asking. The question that, quite frankly, determines all the other questions that then will drive the decisions that we make. It's the simple question of, what's my assignment? What's my assignment? God, what do you want me to do? I think a lot of times we make decisions based upon what we feel like is best for us, and then we just make spiritual justification for it. It's like, well, this is where I want to live, or this is where it's more comfortable for me to do. This is what I think is a good idea. And then, oh yeah, God, you think this is good too, right? And then we kind of like find spiritual reasons to justify that decision. Friends, this command from Jesus says that that's totally the wrong way to go about it. We don't kind of make a decision and then find spiritual justification for it. No, we go to God and we ask God first, God, what do you want me to do for your kingdom? Friends, sometimes that might mean making decisions that make no sense. I mean, as Christians, if we believe that God is our king, then that means that we are not living by the same values of this world. Therefore, we should not be making decisions in the same way as the world makes them. Right? Our decisions should not make sense. If every decision you make makes sense to the non-believers that you know, friends, you're probably not seeking the kingdom of God. Our lives shouldn't make sense. Why? Because we're not valuing the same things as our culture. We're valuing God. He's our king. We're seeking to live to seek his kingdom first. And so don't do what just makes sense to you. Do what the king is assigning you to do. The question then comes, well, then how do we know what God's assigning us? And I'm not going to give you a rubric for that because I think it's more of a heart posture. Right? You know in your heart whether you are being submitted to the Lord and seeking his will, or whether you are trying to assert your will and get God to go along with your agenda. Right? You know that in your heart. There's a heart posture. And so the way to apply this is just to be honest with God. Just to be honest with God. Like, where is your heart at? As you make decisions, how are you making those decisions? Are you trying to get God on board with you? Or are you trying to hear from God what your assignment is from him? Example of how I've seen this work out is when myself and one of my friends were considering coming to the city to start this church. We both saw the importance of the city. And we both saw how in order for God's kingdom to continue to advance, then we need to get a lot more Christians into the city because Christians have abandoned the city. Christians are fleeing from the city. And do we really wonder why our country is turning its back on God? We're losing our cultural influence because cities where most people are, But that's not where the most Christians are. And so the most people are not being affected by the life of Jesus Christ because they're not seeing it through the lives of Christians. They're not hearing the good news through us sharing with them. And you get a lot more Christians back into cities. And so we both saw this. We're both seeking God's kingdom in that. We both saw the value of that. But as we're praying, we came to different conclusions about what our assignments were. Right? I felt an assignment, obviously, to come plant church in the city. But my friend, while he valued the work that's happening there, while he supported what we were going to do, he felt that God had really given him an assignment to pursue being a foster parent in a way that he just didn't think he could approach that in the city. He wanted to have a lot of kids. He wanted to have a big house, not so he could be comfortable, but so he could affect many little lives by showing the love of Christ to them through the noble work of foster care. And so he stayed in the suburbs, not because he was selling out. He stayed in the suburbs because he was seeking God's kingdom, right? We both were seeking God's kingdom, and that led in different directions, right? It's not about the decision that we made that gave it value. It's about how we made the decision. I really truly believe for both myself and my friend, we were making it with a desire to seek God's kingdom first. And so even though we made different decisions, like, I'm so proud of him, and I'm so proud of his willingness, not just to come along with me and enjoy being with me, which would have been a lot of fun. I miss him dearly. But he stayed and did the work that he felt God had called him to do. Not because it was easier, but because it was what he thought God wanted. And so here's my exhortation to you. Before you make a change in your life, before you make a decision that's going to have implications, change the questions you're asking about that. Change the questions you're asking about that and start with this question first. God, what's my assignment? Where are you going to place me? Where do you have me? Where do you want me to be that's going to take the kingdom forward? Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else in life will fall in line after that.